Maren Harrison sat across from her financial advisor, the words not quite registering. She blinked, hoping she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Mr. Levine cleared his throat, discomfort clear in the way he adjusted his tie. "I said the funds aren't there, Maren. Your trust account has been nearly depleted." "That's impossible." Maren leaned forward, her architect's portfolio sliding from her lap onto the carpeted floor of the office. "There should be over $800,000. My grandparents set it up so I couldn't even access most of it until I turned 25. Yes, that's correct. But there was a secondary trustee named." He hesitated, then continued gently, "Your brother Wesley has been making withdrawals over the past 18 months. The most recent one, 3 days ago, emptied almost everything that remained." Maren felt her chest tighten. "Wes? How could he?" "He has his own trust fund." "Had," Mr. Levine corrected. "Records show he depleted his own trust fund approximately 2 years ago." The light suddenly seemed too bright, the office too small. Maren gathered her portfolio mechanically, years of architectural training keeping her movements precise even as her mind reeled. "I see," she said, although she didn't see at all. "Thank you for informing me." Mr. Levine was saying something about legal options, about consultations, but Maren was already mentally calculating the cost of the graduate program she had planned to start next semester. The prestigious master's degree that would elevate her from a junior architect to a design lead. The future her grandparents had sacrificed to secure for her. Gone. Wes's apartment was in one of those gleaming downtown high-rises that had sprung up during the latest boom. Maren rode the elevator to the 23rd floor, rehearsing what she would say, attempting to quiet the storm building inside her. When Wes opened the door, he had the audacity to smile. "Hey, sis. This is unexpected." He wore designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Is it?" Maren walked past him into an apartment that screamed money, modernist furniture, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view that took in half the city. "Nice place. My money seems to be treating you well." His smile faltered. "Ah. You talked to Levine." "Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't pretend this is just an awkward situation we need to navigate. You stole my inheritance. $850,000. Money Grandma and Grandpa set aside so I could finish my education and get established." Wes walked to a bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid. He didn't offer her any. "I'm going to pay it all back, Maren. I just made some bad investments, got in over my head with some guys, but I've got a deal lined up that's going to fix everything." "The same way your cryptocurrency play was going to fix everything? Or that restaurant you invested in? Or the racehorses?" Maren's voice wavered, betraying the anger coursing through her. "Our grandparents took us in when Mom and Dad died. They gave up their retirement to raise us. And this is how you honor them?" A flicker of shame crossed his face, quickly replaced by defensive anger. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. These aren't normal debts, Maren. These guys don't take payment plans, so you sacrificed my future instead of facing consequences for your actions." Classic Wes. She walked to the window, looking out at the city where they'd both grown up, orphaned but never abandoned thanks to their grandparents' love. "I'm going to make it right," he insisted. Maren turned back to him. "How much is left?" His eyes slid away from hers. "It's complicated." "How much?" "None," he admitted finally. "But I've got this real estate development deal that's almost." "Spare me." Maren cut him off. "I want monthly payments, starting immediately." "Whatever you can afford." Wes laughed, actually laughed. "On what grounds?" "The trust was set up so trustees could make withdrawals. It's all technically legal. You know Grandpa and Grandma made you a trustee in case something happened to me. Not so you could steal my future." "Good luck proving that intent in court," he said, swirling his drink. "Besides, you've always been the responsible one. You'll figure something out." As Maren left Wes's luxury apartment, something hardened within her. All her life, she'd been the sensible one, the one who followed the rules, who planned ahead, who did what was expected. What had it gotten her? A brother who exploited her, an empty bank account, and derailed dreams. No more. The next 6 months were a blur of 18-hour days. Maren continued working at her architecture firm during the day, then spent nights researching everything she could about Wes's business dealings. She postponed her graduate plans indefinitely and moved to a cheaper apartment farther from downtown. She consulted an attorney, only to learn that prosecuting family financial crimes was indeed complex and expensive. The trust had been set up with Wes as a secondary trustee with full access, a safeguard their grandparents had established in case something happened to Maren. They never imagined Wes would abuse that power. "I can't afford a drawn-out legal battle," Maren told her friend Diane over coffee one Sunday. Diane, a paralegal, shook her head sympathetically. "The system isn't designed for situations like yours. It assumes family members won't destroy each other this way. So Wes just gets away with it. He steals my entire future and there's nothing I can do?" "I didn't say that." Diane's eyes narrowed. "I said the system isn't designed for it. That doesn't mean you don't have options." Over the coming weeks, Maren crafted her approach to dealing with Wes with the same meticulous attention she brought to architectural blueprints. Every move was calculated, every action designed with a specific outcome in mind. She started by accidentally running into Jessica, Wes's latest girlfriend, at the organic market Wes had mentioned they frequented. "Oh my God, you're Maren!" Jessica exclaimed when Maren introduced herself. "Wes talks about you all the time. The brilliant little sister." "I bet he does," Maren thought, but she smiled warmly. "All good things, I hope." They arranged to meet for lunch the following week, where Maren carefully steered the conversation to Wes's business ventures. It turned out, was an enthusiastic but not particularly discerning investor. "He's working on this amazing development deal," Jessica gushed. "Luxury condos on the site of that old factory complex. Wes says we'll at least triple our investment." Maren nodded encouragingly, filing away the information. "He's always had a knack for finding opportunities." "How did you two meet, anyway?" Through Jessica, Maren gained valuable intelligence about Wes's current schemes, his business partners, and the precarious state of his finances. The loan sharks hadn't disappeared, he'd simply forestalled them with promises backed by Maren's money. Meanwhile, Maren leveraged her position at the architecture firm to learn more about the development deal Wes was pursuing. Her firm had actually been approached about the project but had declined due to concerns about zoning complications and environmental remediation costs. "That site is a nightmare," her boss had commented. "Whoever develops it is looking at years of red tape and millions in cleanup costs before they can even break ground." Maren began making quiet inquiries among the city planners and zoning officials she knew through her work. Without ever mentioning Wes's name, she highlighted the environmental concerns about the old factory site, ensuring the appropriate regulatory departments were paying close attention to any development proposals. Next, she used her savings to hire a private investigator to look into Wes's finances. The investigator's report confirmed what she suspected. Wes was living far beyond his means, juggling debt from multiple sources, and he had significant tax liabilities he was concealing. With anonymous email accounts, Maren began sending carefully crafted messages to Wes's business associates. Never accusing, simply raising questions about the viability of his ventures, hinting at concerns about his financial stability. "I'm considering investing in the Harbor Point development project," one email read, "but I've heard concerning things about one of the partners, Maren Harrison. Do you have any insights you could share?" Maren was patient, allowing doubt to spread organically through Wes's network. She watched from a distance as his demeanor changed over the months, his confident swagger giving way to a hunted look, his social media posts becoming less frequent, the designer clothes replaced by off-the-rack alternatives. Jessica stopped returning Maren's calls after 4 months, and Maren later learned they had broken up. Maren heard from a mutual friend, Jessica had questioned Wes about some inconsistencies in the development project's prospectus, and he had responded poorly. The culmination of Maren's plan came 9 months after discovering the theft. She had meticulously documented Wes's tax evasion and sent an anonymous tip to the IRS. She had also gathered enough evidence of his misrepresentations to investors to craft a compelling dossier, which she anonymously delivered to his 3 major remaining backers just before a crucial funding meeting. Maren was sitting at a cafe across from Wes's office building when he emerged, ashen-faced and unsteady. His phone rang as he stood on the sidewalk, and Maren could read the body language even from a distance, the slumping shoulders, the hand rubbing his face in desperation. 2 weeks later, Wes declared bankruptcy. The IRS had frozen his accounts pending an investigation, his investors had pulled out, and the development deal had collapsed under regulatory scrutiny. Maren received a text from him late one night, "I know what you did." She replied simply, "I learned from the best." "Ms. Harrison, your brother has agreed to see you." Maren followed the corrections officer through the sterile hallways of the minimum security facility where Wes was serving 14 months for tax evasion. Additional charges related to fraud were still pending, but a plea deal seemed likely. Wes looked smaller somehow, the prison jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. His eyes, however, held the same mixture of resentment and charm that had characterized him since childhood. "Come to gloat?" he asked as she sat across from him. "No." Maren placed a folder on the table between them. "I came to give you this." Wes opened it cautiously, as if expecting another blow. Inside was a court document detailing the restitution plan that would go into effect upon his release. The sale of his condo, car, and remaining assets had recovered nearly $200,000 of Maren's money. The rest would come from garnished wages once he found employment. "You've thought of everything," he said bitterly. "I had time to plan while working instead of pursuing my degree." Maren kept her voice neutral. "But that changes next fall." Wes looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I was accepted to the graduate program at Wellman. I start in September." She allowed herself a small smile. "It won't be easy working part-time while studying, but I've arranged a scholarship that will help." "Good for you," Wes said, but there was no warmth in his voice. "So why are you really here, Maren?" "To show me how well you're doing despite what I did." Maren studied him for a moment, this brother who had been her only family since their grandparents passed, the boy who had taught her to ride a bike, who had defended her against bullies in elementary school, who had held her hand at 2 funerals before she turned 10. "I'm here because I wanted you to know that what you did had consequences, not just for you, but for me. Real consequences that changed the course of my life. But I'm also here because I need you to understand something, I won't let those consequences define me." Wes's expression wavered between defiance and something more vulnerable. "The scholarship fund I mentioned?" Maren continued. "I established it for students affected by financial fraud or theft. I'm calling it the Harrison Legacy Fund, after Grandma and Grandpa." She stood, gathering her jacket. "They taught us both about resilience, Wes. About building something meaningful from what you have, not taking what isn't yours." "And the lesson for me?" he asked quietly. Maren paused at the door. "That's up to you to figure out. You have 14 months to think about it." As she walked through the prison parking lot, Maren felt a weight lifting that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The trust fund was gone, but she had reclaimed something more valuable, her power, her future, her agency. The betrayal had changed her, hardened her in ways that couldn't be undone. But as she drove away from the prison, Maren realized that there was freedom in that hardness too, a resilience forged through fire, just as her grandparents had taught her. They had given her more than money. They had given her the tools to rebuild when everything was taken away. That was an inheritance that could never be stolen.